and understanding my emotions and not letting them control me, and understanding that I was more responsible for the place and the state of my life than I wanted to admit. What's up? What's going on? Welcome to the Risen Fallen podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hendrickson. And if you are brand new to this podcast, what you can expect is open and authentic conversations about things like mental health, self-development, and how to get your life moving in the right direction. Even if you're feeling like you're not confident about where you are in your life right now, at least having the confidence knowing that maybe every single day you're making maybe 10 steps, maybe 5 steps, maybe 3 steps, or maybe just 1 step in the right direction, in the direction of the life that you want to live, in the life that you would proud to call yours. And if you're not new to this podcast, if you're a returning listener or a returning viewer, whether you're watching the YouTube version of this or listen to the podcast version, I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for coming back and supporting this movement, supporting this journey, and supporting the idea of making yourself stronger and better and smarter every single day. And along the way, not just making yourself better, but lifting others up as well. And whether you're brand new to this podcast or not, I just want to remind you guys from the bottom of my heart that you are the reason that I do what I do. Yes, you. Listen to this or watching this right now. And it is a beautiful Saturday afternoon as I film this. We just kicked off summer here in Vancouver. I'm chilling out. I'm kind of just chilling in my office this morning. I woke up, we went for a Risen Fallen hike, a little hike around. We went to North Vancouver, got out in nature, got to meditate a bit by the river. It was a nice, relaxing morning. Came home, had some breakfast, chilled out with my mom, chilled out with Teddy, and just kind of had a nice, relaxing morning. Spent some time with some friends, some family, some loved ones. And then went grocery shopping, and now I'm here. I'm chilling out. I'm having a little bit of coffee right now, and I'm hanging out with you guys. And so it's Thursday morning when this drops, and so happy Thursday. I hope your week is going well. We're kind of coming to a close of this week as it's Thursday, obviously. It's the Friday to Friday, baby. The Friday to Friday. And so we're kicking off this weekend with some good vibes. And, I just wanted to kind of make this quick little episode. But before I dive into it, I'm going to have a little sip of my coffee here. So whether you're hanging out and you're starting your day off and you got a cup of coffee in front of you, or maybe you're working, or maybe you're coming home from work, or maybe you got a glass of water, whatever it is, maybe you got a liquid beverage in front of you, or maybe you just don't. And I just wanted to invite you right now to take a little sip, or if you've got nothing in front of you, take a little breath and just kind of get centered and get kind of focused and just kind of get in the mindset of growth and development. And I'm just going to take a little sip right here, and we're going to get started right quick. So let's get to it. So like I said, oh, God, that's good. I love coffee. Anyway, so like I said, I am a pretty big proponent of routines. I like the idea of routines. I like the fact that routines help us get, closer to where we want to get, and they keep us consistent with our energy, with the way that we spend our time, with the way that we think, and I'm a pretty big, I like routine. And I think that all of us like routine, whether we want to admit that we like routine or not. Our bodies and our brains function best off routine. Your brain will always look for a routine. And, there's tons of different, pieces of evidence for this, whether it be your circadian rhythm or anything like that. And, when people first ask about routines, they think about, well, what should I have in my routine? I think definitely exercise is one of the things you should have in your routine. You should have some mindfulness stuff, some reflection, something like journaling, or being able to speak to a counselor, or being able to speak to somebody about what's going on in your brain. I'm a pretty big proponent of journaling, which I've talked a lot about before, and I'll probably talk about again pretty soon. I've made episodes on it in the past, but one of the things that is deeply ingrained in my routine, which, kind of settled into my life when I was doing the 75 Hard Challenge, every single time, it just kind of reminded me more and more the value of reading. And, for there's many different reasons. Obviously, when you're reading, you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining perspective, you're gaining mindfulness, you're gaining the practice of sitting still for a long period of time, you're gaining the art of not being distracted by your phone. You're just kind of you can lose yourself in a book very easily. And I've kind of shifted between reading fiction and nonfiction, novels and biographies, and tons of different things throughout the past few years. But if you are considering reading, or starting reading, or continuing reading, or changing up what you're reading, I wanted to make this quick little episode of 4 books that I'd recommend that you read immediately. 4 books that will change the way that you think about the world, change the way that you think about yourself. Maybe you've read these books before, maybe you can revisit them, but 4 books that I think were life-changing for me, and 4 books that you need to read. And so, without further ado, let's jump right into this. I'll talk about a little bit about why I like each book. They're in no specific order or anything like that. I just kind of threw them on my desk in front of me right here, and we're going to talk about each individual book. And maybe you can pick one of these books up in the near future, and you can start reading it. And if you like it, you can message me, and we can talk about what books you like, and we can kind of build from there. And if you have any books that you would recommend that I read that maybe I haven't read yet, then send me a message on Instagram at RisenFallen. And I love to get book recommendations. Reading is part of my morning routine. So if you have any good book recommendations, then I'm excited to hear about them. And so let's jump into it. The very first one I want to talk about is this one right here, The War of Art, Steven Pressfield. And I'm sure you guys have heard of this book before. It's a really good book. It's a short book. It's not that long. You can flip through it pretty quick. These books are pretty. This book in specific is pretty easy to read. It's got nice big text. There's some graphics in here. And the reason that I like this book a lot, I have the physical copy and I have the audio copy as well. The reason I liked this book a lot is because it put words to thoughts that I have that I've never put words to before. I couldn't label them with words. I just kind of thought about those things, and I thought I was the only one that dealt with similar thoughts like this. And the main thought that book talks about is the idea of resistance, and the resistance that people feel when they want to start a new journey, a new hobby, a new creative outlet, a new pastime, a new way of making money or career or anything like that. The resistance that you feel, and it makes the resistance into a tangible enemy that you can kind of start to observe and fight against, and understanding how momentum will work with you. And I don't want to ruin the book too much and spoil it for you, but that's a very good way to, I feel like, summarize that book. Steven Pressfield, very interesting guy. He's been on Joe Rogan. That's actually where I heard about this book, was through Joe Rogan interviews, because he talks about this book very often. So I picked it up. I grabbed the audio version as well. I listened to it. I read it. And it's a book that I'd recommend. I think that it can really help shift your mindset and help you identify when you're feeling the resistance and what that resistance is telling you, and being able to differentiate those type of thoughts from your identity, and understanding that it's not you holding you back. It's the resistance you're feeling. And maybe that is a part of you. but really just that you have the choice whether to listen to that resistance or not. And so that is one of the books that I would recommend for you. Moving on, the next book is one that I've talked about on this podcast before, but I thought it would be worth mentioning again. This is one of my most read books. It is not in the best shape, as you can see, very crinkled cover, kind of bent in spine here. This is my most read book. This is honestly one of the first books that I actually finished every single page for in my adult life. The reason I started reading this book is because of how easy it is to read. It's called The Art of Living. It is philosophies from Epictetus. The subtitle is A Classical Manual on Virtue, Happiness, and Effectiveness. This book was given to me as a gift way back in the day before I, started working in construction, when I was still working in the gyms. And I used to keep that book in my drawer in my desk, and every single day when I would come into work, I would just open it to a random page, and there would be a little passage there from Epictetus, and it was just one of those books where I could flip it open to a random page, and that passage would be relevant to anything that I was dealing in my life. It felt like it was like it just touched me so much in appropriate ways. And it was also my introduction to Stoic philosophy and just reading in the first place, because before I had picked up that book, I thought, reading's not for me. I suck at reading. It's not something I'm interested in. Philosophy was definitely not something I was interested in at the time. I was just kind of a gym bro. All I cared about was bodybuilding, making money, lifting every single day. I was eating a ton, and nothing really interested me other than the gym. I was in a really dark place in my life where I thought that I could just spend time alone and lift weights and listen to music and eat and rinse and repeat. And it was really my first introduction, like I said, to Stoic philosophy and the idea of discipline and the idea of self-mastery and understanding my emotions and not letting them control me, and understanding that I was more responsible for the place and the state of my life than I wanted to admit. And this led me to reading a lot more Stoic philosophy. Obviously, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is another great one, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. Daily Stoic, anything by him is going to be good. I couldn't recommend his books enough. If you want to have like a good introduction into what this kind of stuff is all about, you can check out his YouTube channel, Daily Stoic. But I would highly recommend picking up this book. It's a really easy read. Like I said, it's not like stories or chapters or anything. Just like literally each page is a separate passage, and you could just not have to read it in order. I flipped it to a random page every single day, and it was always something that was relevant to my life. And I think that it's a valuable book. It's still, like I said, it's my most read book to this day. I always have it close to me and near me, and it's something that I revisit very, very often. So yeah, check out this book, The Art of Living. You can check it out, and you'll like it, and I'm sure of it. So the next book I'm going to read or recommend for you to read, I actually just recently finished this book. It's a book by a pretty famous author. Most people hear about this book first when they hear about this author. It's called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, Robin Sharma. And this is actually the not the first book I read by this author. The first book I read by this author was another book called The Leader Without a Title, I think it's called, or The Leader with No Title, or something like that. And that book I really, really enjoyed. I think I've talked about that book before on this podcast. But, his most famous book is this one, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And after finishing it recently, I can understand why, because it is a very easy book to read. It's a very short, simple story. But within that story, there's small conversations about lessons that this one person has learned, and he's kind of relaying it to somebody else. And the reason I like this book so much is because it provides very simple imagery that helps you understand and conceptualize different lessons of life, and really just helps you comprehend different routines and how to make routines and different ideas that I feel like can help us navigate this world of, needing to have the most amount of money, needing to have the flashiest cars, the coolest clothes, the biggest house, and being rich. Obviously, the title, like I said, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, understanding that these materialistic things are not the things that should actually drive us and motivate us. They're not evil in and of themselves, but the pursuit of those things and putting the importance of those things higher up on the totem pole of importance, putting those in front of what is actually truly valuable in this life, will lead you to a miserable life and cause you to be unhealthy, both mentally and physically. And understanding what the important things are actually in life, because it's not the money, the houses, the cars, the clothes. Those things are not evil. Those things are not bad, but they're not the most important things in life. And if you place those things before the truly important things in life, it will lead you to be unhealthy and unhappy. And the very last book I'm going to recommend is The Upward Spiral. I don't know if I've talked about this book before, but it's by Dr. Alex Korb. The subtitle is Using Neuroscience to Reverse the Course of Depression, One Small Change at a Time. And this book is pretty important to me. I've read it a few times. It is, this book touched my life, again, in a very appropriate way. And I've kind of told this story before during interview portions of this podcast, but along my journey of, dealing with my own mental health and my own depression and anxiety and other issues that I've had, I've dealt with many different doctors. I've seen, a couple different professionals, counselors, etc. Sorry, I got to take a sip here and rest my throat a little bit. And I had my bouts with the medical system, that's kind of another story for another time. But this book, The Upward Spiral, was recommended to me by the last doctor I spoke to about my depression. And the reason that he was the last doctor that I spoke to is because he helped me so significantly. I remember that I walked into his office and I basically said, if you're about to prescribe me a bunch of medication and give me some weird advice on how I need some more pharmaceutical products inside of my body to get better, and that this is going to be something I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life, and that I need to take these pills until I feel better, I'm going to fucking walk out. And he was like, whoa, dude, I wouldn't fucking recommend you jump on any prescription pills at all in the first time I speak to you, because I don't even know who you are or what your story is. Like, just sit down and tell me about everything about your life. Tell me about what you eat, how you sleep, what you do for work, what your relationships are like, what your relationships with your parents are like, what you think about, what makes you depressed, what makes you anxious, why you feel like that makes you anxious. And I basically sat down and talked to this gentleman for like what felt like probably 2 hours. We just sat there and talked. And he kind of made me feel understood and heard and normal about the things that I was going through. And at the very end of our conversation, we sat down and he basically was saying, like, look, I'm going to give you 2 books to go home and read. I want you to read these books and don't come back and see me until you finish them. And it felt like I was being interviewed to be his patient. The 2 books that he gave me were Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which I've talked about before on this podcast as well. But the other book that he gave me was The Upward Spiral, this book right here that I'm telling you guys you need to read. And the reason that I liked this book so much is because it put depression in a perspective for me that I never thought about before. It helped me understand that, it's not a permanent thing. It's not something you have to deal with for the rest of your life. And not only is it not permanent, but it is something that you can change. You have the power to change it. And our brains are so plastic and have the ability to make these changes. And it's up to us whether we want to set these routines for ourselves, and understanding that it's not something that happens immediately. It's kind of something that requires a compound effect of little small changes that you'll have to make in your life and in your routine. And it just kind of gave me a lot more hope in understanding that, like I said, it's not a life sentence. Depression and anxiety, it's not a life sentence. And it's something that, not only is it not a life sentence, but it's something that you have the ability to change in yourself. And that was it was an uplifting kind of notion for me to hear about. Because I feel like, when we hear about, diagnosis like depression, like ADHD, like anxiety, like all of these different disorders that we might be diagnosed with, we feel like, okay, well, I guess that's who I am. That's part of who I am. That's part of me. And that's always going to be who I am. That's always going to be part of me. And I was born like this, and I'll die like this. And nothing will ever change. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth. Just because you're like this right now, that doesn't mean that's who you are. That's what you're like right now. That's it. And we always have the ability to change who we are. We always have the ability to change who we associate with, but also we have the ability to change how we think and how we behave and how we act. And it might take time, and it might take repeated efforts, and it might take failure. It might take tough times. And sometimes it takes enough tough times for you to even be motivated enough to want to change. But these diagnoses, whatever the proper word for that is, these diagnosi that we get are not life sentences. It's not something that's permanent. It's not something that's fixed. It's not something that defines who you are as a person. Because like any other illness, these things, they can be cured. They can be, and they might even come back in the future. And I feel like that's what the chronic depression really means, that it might be something that kind of revisits you in the future, like a shitty neighbor that keeps knocking at your door. But if you set up the right routines for yourself, if you set up the right defense mechanisms for yourself, and you can show up at the door armed and ready to defend yourself. And so that was kind of one of the biggest takeaways that I had from that experience with that doctor and from the experience of reading that book. And so with that all being said, I think I am going to go for a run right now, kind of get myself recharged back up for the afternoon, take care of some chores around the house. And on that note, I hope you guys have a good weekend. And like I said, if you have any book recommendations for myself, any books that you want me to share on the podcast that I can read and talk about and recommend for other people, then message me on Instagram at Risen Fallen. We do have the Risen Fallen meetups as well. If you're in the Vancouver area, you want to come for a hike, you want to go for a barbecue, you want to go grab coffee, you want to get involved in the community of making yourself better and lifting other people up along the way, you can get involved with the Risen Fallen meetups. You can get involved with the Telegram group that we have daily group chats on as well. Reach out to me on Instagram about that. if you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, anything like that you want to address, or maybe you want to be heard on this podcast, but you don't want to come on the podcast in like an interview form, you can message me any questions that you have, and I will answer them on this podcast. Reach out to me, like I said, on Instagram at Risen Fallen. And if you want to support the movement and just help, give back to the community, you can grab yourself one of these hoodies. You can grab yourself a tee as well at risenfallen.com, and the proceeds from that go towards the in-person meetups and the things that we do in the community here. So with all that being said, that's my little housekeeping to do there. I hope you guys have a good weekend. I will check in with you on Monday. Much love and peace out, you beautiful human beings. Go get some books and read. Bye.